Caitlin, I want to go to you here on this information that we are now getting about what was contained inside of this target letter. There are 3 potential statutes, it looks like, that may be used against Trump in this election interference case. Can you tell us about what we know now?
Yeah, so Abby, whenever a subject gets a target letter, so the Justice Department basically is telling them you might be indicted, typically in the sample version of this letter, and we haven't seen it yet, but there have been some reports in some other media outlets who have said this letter does identify some of the crimes that Donald Trump is very likely to be charged with, that the prosecutors are clearly looking at. One of them, conspiracy to defraud the United States. That is a general conspiracy charge, but it's a pretty significant charge. It's used quite often. It essentially means that Donald Trump was making an agreement with other people to carry forward the acts that the Justice Department believes are illegal. It is a pretty significant thing to be charged with that. On top of that, the tampering with a witness charge, that's something that we don't have a lot of more detail of exactly what crime that could be. There's a couple different ones, but it might not actually be tampering with a witness in the classic sense. It might be the way that the Justice Department has known to be investigating here and has been using in these January 6 cases, where they're saying they're accusing people of obstructing the congressional proceeding. And so that is something that we knew that they were looking at least related to some others. And then this third potential charge that's listed here, according to multiple news outlets, is that there is a deprivation of rights possibility of a charge. That's a civil rights charge, and I've talked to some defense lawyers, some former prosecutors about it. It's actually not charged that often, but it is a charge used where someone who's in a public position uses their ability in some way that is wrong. Either it's outside of the bounds of what their role is, or they use their role in a way to deprive someone else of some sort of right. It doesn't have to be civil rights that are classically protected, but it is a deprivation of rights charge that could potentially carry some pretty serious penalties if it does have to do with violence. But, you know, we don't know exactly what this case is going to be, how it's going to be laid out. In the Justice Department's own words, whenever they bring this indictment, there always could be other things that we see whenever the indictment is filed, if it is approved by the grand jury. But those 3 things, that is a pretty significant case that does track with what we believe the Justice Department has been investigating here for some time.
All right, Caitlin, stay with us. Again, we have team coverage. We're going to keep following this as it moves along throughout the morning. But, Katie, I want to follow up with what Caitlin was describing there. From a lawyer perspective, from a legal perspective, as you look at these 3 potential charges as have been reported by other news outlets, what stands out to you?
Well, I think that we obviously don't know what charges are going to be laid out. And the other thing we don't know is whether Jack Smith has evidence that has not been disclosed to the public at this point. There's been ongoing interviews. And so there may be other charges that are outside of what is actually known to the public at this point. But certainly, I think on the facts, those are very obvious charges in terms of defrauding the government, conspiracies. There's a lot of interviews with other folks about conversations that Trump had with them. So that seems clear. I think the bigger question is really on kind of the jurisdictional side of things in terms of his status as the president at the time. And that's something that will also have to be litigated if there is an indictment in this case. But again, these are all speculation because we don't have the indictment that's been filed at this point.
Do you think that the target letter will be the scope of it? What is contained in that letter in terms of what charges he could possibly face?
It's possible. I mean, generally speaking, in a target letter, the prosecutors are going to lay out what the allegations are, but there's no final charging decision that's made at that point, and they're certainly not bound by that.
Yeah. So, Paula, let's go to you. I mean, this is in the context here of an incredible amount of legal issues that Trump himself is facing. It's not just this. You're in Florida because of that other case, the classified documents case. How is Trump's legal orbit handling all of this? And are you getting any indications that he's going to need more legal firepower to go into this next phase of things?
Oh, yeah, Abby, he is absolutely going to need additional lawyers, especially if he is charged in Washington, D.C. as well. This actually came up yesterday in court. His lawyers talked about the burden that they're currently bearing both in New York, where the former president faces criminal and civil cases. Of course, they have one special counsel, criminal prosecution, and they made a nod to the target letter saying, look, another one's likely coming. And they talked to the judge about how this was a lot of work, not just for them, but also for their client in preparing their client for each of these cases. Now, they were using this in court to try to delay this trial until at least next year, likely after the election. But it also it makes it crystal clear that he absolutely needs additional lawyers. His two lawyers, Todd Blanche, Chris Kise, they're working with some other lawyers who are in his orbit. But after the recent departures of at least 3 of his key attorneys, he's going to have to look for more lawyers. And Abby, as we know, that's been difficult for him over the past few years. Prospective lawyers have told us they're worried about getting paid, and they're also worried about the potential political blowback or alienating their current clients. So it is likely he'll find additional lawyers, but it's taken a while here in Florida, and it could take a while in D.C. as well.
Yeah.
Maggie, I was struck yesterday in calls and text messages with Republicans outside the Trump orbit. I think the frustration and concern related to a major January 6th case or a major election interference case, just because that issue, in their view, resonates with the American public politically. Maybe not dramatically across the Republican electorate or in the primary, but certainly more broadly in the country. My question is, does Trump view these things differently, view these cases differently, view as one as more of a threat than another?
So Trump views broadly all of these cases as a threat to him. You put them collectively together, Phil, and he is facing significant jail time if convicted, particularly in the federal cases, assuming, again, he has not been charged here yet. I think it's important to note a target letter does usually lead to charges. It doesn't always. But yes, he is looking at this broadly as a political threat. The documents case in particular had very much upset them for a variety of reasons, because it was an FBI search on his home. It was a different type of thing. In this case, he is upset about it. I heard yesterday it was basically a typical plane ride to Iowa, but he was not in a great mood in portions of it. I think you're going to hear that going forward. He is going to be upset because this is, as you say, a dominant issue in the country, even if it's not the thing that voters say that they are voting on. You are correct that Republicans are aware that in 2022, candidates who espoused Trump's election lies ended up basically paying the price at the ballot box in November, even if, as you note, this played well in Republican primaries where Trump's voice and vote really do matter. But at the moment, he is seeing this broadly as a threat to his freedom, and his advisors have been, in private conversations, pretty blunt that they see it as he has to win the election, and that is how he guarantees that he does not face jail time. Now, again, it only takes one juror in any of these cases. He has not been convicted of anything, but the fact that they're looking at an election to the highest office in the land as some kind of an insurance policy or an out for him really affects and I think colors the entire presidential race.